Hello and welcome. My name is Sarah Hesketh, and I am the managing editor at Modern Poetry in Translation. And today I am wearing my brown glasses, a blue t-shirt, and a cardigan because it is a little chilly here in London today. Um, Thank you for joining us today for the digital launch for our latest issue of Modern Poetry in Translation magazine. This is Bearing the Burden of Sameness, a focus on care. A little bit of housekeeping to start. This session is being recorded and will be made available within the next sort of 10 days on our YouTube channel as well. So if you do need to step out, or if you enjoy it so much you want to watch it back again, then you will be able to do so. We are delighted to be joined today by some of our contributors to the issue. The way we're going to work for the next hour is that we'll have some readings to start, and then we will have time for a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A box as we go along, and we will come back to them at the end and do our best to answer them. So as well as being MPT's normal managing editor, it was a real privilege for me to take the reins as a guest editor for this issue. The issue of care and social care and the experience of carers is something that I'm really interested in, and I work quite a lot with carers to write poetry, to use poetry as a way of exploring feelings, experiences around care. And it was amazing to get such a range of responses back on our open call for this issue. We deliberately kind of kept our edition of care very open, and that has led to a really brilliantly diverse and interesting selection of poems. We have people talking about parenting. We have people talking about looking after parents who are dying. We have people talking about the experience of adoption. We also have people writing about, I guess, the need for care and stewardship of the environment, the people, and the planet around us. So it's amazing to have such a brilliant selection of work. I'm really, really excited to have our contributors with us here today. So the translators that we have with us are Rachel Rankin, and we also have Csilla Toldy, both of whom have translated work that appears in this issue. We are delighted to be having an extra special guest with us today, Şafak Sariçiçek, whose work Csilla translated for the issue, is also joining us to read some of the poems in the original. And it is, in fact, the first time that Csilla and Şafak have met each other even digitally. So we're especially pleased to be bringing them together on screen today. So I'm just going to introduce Rachel, and then she is going to read for us first, and then we will move on to Csilla and Şafak. So Rachel is a poet, translator, researcher based in Edinburgh, and she is a brilliant translator from Scandinavian languages, but with a particular focus on Norwegian. And it was from Norwegian that she translated for this issue. And I am going to hand you over to Rachel to tell us a little bit more about the original work and to read from it as well. Thank you, Rachel.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for asking me to come and read today. I'm sitting here with a stripy t-shirt on, stripy polo neck, because it is also quite chilly in Scotland as well. I've got shoulder length hair, and I'm sitting against a lovely teal background as well. And yeah, today I'm going to be reading you some poems from the Norwegian poet Brynjulf Jung Tjønn. Most specifically from his poetry collection Hvit Norsk Mann, which translates to English as White Norwegian Man. And this was published in 2022, and it was basically a bit of a phenomenon in Norway. It was critically acclaimed across the board. It was the highest selling poetry collection in Norway of 2022. It's sold out time and time again. I can't remember what edition it's on now, but it's pretty far on. And it's won several prizes, kind of unanimous decision to give it, all these wonderful prizes in Norway. And it really isn't hard to see why it is so successful, I suppose. Essentially, it's an autobiographical collection. Brynjulf was born in South Korea, and he was adopted at the age of 3 by Norwegian parents, and he grew up in the west of Norway on a farm. And when you think of the kind of stereotypical Norwegian nature, the fjords, the farms, the mountains, and that's the kind of the area where he grew up. Despite this, however, because he doesn't look like a white Norwegian man, he experiences racism, experiences microaggression, people saying that he's not Norwegian, or people saying that he's not Norwegian enough. And this collection basically holds up a mirror to Norwegian society and says, this is how I am, this is how I'm treated in Norway, in your society. Wouldn't life be so much easier for me if I was a white Norwegian man? Because then I wouldn't have to deal with all of these horrible things that I have to put up with. And I think it's really important for Norwegians to read that, but also people outside of Norway, because I think when we think of Norway, we tend to think of Norway as this kind of utopia of equality and all the rest of it. And the truth of the fact is that it's not. There's a lot of work to be done there as well, and loads of different issues. And I'm really pleased that this was I was able to get some of Brynjulf's poems into the collection. So thank you so much for accepting them. I'm going to read a series of poems from the collection, including the ones that are in the issue. I'm going to read them all in English, and then there are two that I'm going to read first in Norwegian and then in English, and these are two that are in the collection itself, just as a context and also just as a bit of a kind of warning, I suppose, in terms of the content of one of the poems. One of them mentions a stepsister. This is a reference to Norwegian teenager Johanna Hansen, who was adopted from China. Brynjulf draws on a lot of adoptee stories in this collection, and she was sadly murdered by her step brother a couple of years ago now, who was a white supremacist, and he went on to then attack a mosque, and he's been arrested. He's in jail now. So he draws on that, and then he also makes references to blowing up buildings and shooting young people, which is a reference to Anders Breivik, who carried out the terrorist attacks on Utøya and Oslo back in 2011. So just as a little bit of context. I'm just going to start reading then in that case. I will just head. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a white Norwegian man. If only I had had blonde hair. If only I had had blue or green eyes. If only I had been a white Norwegian man. What kind of problems would I have had then? I have thought about this every single day, ever since I was little and stood in the mirror and wondered why I had such yellow skin, why my hair was so black, why my eyes were so narrow, why I didn't look like anyone I went to school with, didn't look like my cousins, didn't look like my parents. Why should I, among 5 million Norwegians, look like I am Chinese? They ask me, where do you come from? I reply, I come from Fajos in Western Norway. They ask me, but where do you really come from? I reply, I was born in South Korea. I was 3 years old when I came to Norway. I grew up on a farm along with my parents. They ask me, when you say my parents, what you mean is your adoptive parents, right? When I got a girlfriend, one of my cousins asked if my girlfriend was like me or if she was Norwegian. At a wedding, the father of the bride comes over to me and asks in English, where are you from? I reply that I am Norwegian, that I was adopted from South Korea but have lived almost all my life on a farm in the west of Norway. He asks me if I enjoy living in Norway. I don't shoot young people. I don't blow up buildings. I don't kill my stepsister. I don't stab dark-skinned children. Yet all it takes is a virus outbreak on the other side of the world for people to take a detour when they see me on the street. I am the little child without a name and birthday, without a mother and father. I am the little child who, aged 2, was found in a train station, Kyungsan Station, in the sound of Yongsan, and transported to the children's home, Sunrakwon, in the same town. When I arrived at the children's home, I knew the Korean words for mum and dad. This next poem I will read in Norwegian, and then I will read the English afterwards. Det står I rapportene mine at jeg et en bolle med ris hver dag, og litt grønnsaker og kjøtt, at jeg har en normal utvikling og normal kroppsbygning. Jeg kan ta av meg skoene hvis noen knytter opp lissene fra meg. Jeg kan ta av og på meg buksene alene. Det står I rapportene at jeg liker kaker, frukt og litt snacks. Jeg sover fra klokka 7 om kvelden til 6 neste morgen. Jeg tar en liten hørneblund på ettermiddagen. Det står også at jeg not cheerful. Jeg har a gloomy expression. Jeg glad I one who cares about him, puts out his arms if one holds him. Det står at jeg ikke leker så godt med de andre barna. Jeg vil helst leke alene. Det står at jeg liker meg best når jeg har et fang å sitte på. Jeg må bli tatt hånd om med abundant affection. It says in my reports that I eat a bowl of rice every day and some vegetables and meat, and that my development is normal and my physique is normal. I can take off my shoes if someone unties the laces for me. I can put on and take off my trousers by myself. It says in the reports that I like cakes, fruit, and some snacks. I sleep from 7 o'clock in the evening until 6 the next morning. I take a little cat nap in the afternoon. It also says that I am not cheerful. I have a gloomy expression. I am fond of one who cares about him, puts out his arms if one holds him. It says that I don't play so well with the other children. I would rather play by myself. It says that I like it best when I have a lap to sit on. I must be taken care of with abundant affection. When I grow up, I will comb my blonde hair back. These big blue eyes of mine will never be hidden behind sunglasses. When I grow up, I will be sunburned. I will walk around with red skin. I will be so proud of my freckles. My hair will be so brittle and white that it will break off. I will never, never, never ask for anything else if only I could be white. And the next one I will also read in Norwegian, followed by the English. Glassdøra inn til tannlegekontoret åpner seg. Min her, spør ei gråhåret tannlege. Min her, spør han igjen. Denne gangen ser han rett på meg. Jeg ser rundt meg og møter blikket til tannlegen igjen og rister på hovedet. Tannlegen lukker glassdøra og forsvinner. Hva navn sa han, spør jeg sonen min. Min, tror jeg, svarer jeg sonen min. Tannlegen dukker opp bak glassdøra igjen. Denne gangen åpner han den ikke, men ser ut gjennom glasset. Blikket våre møtes igjen. Så forsvinner han. Så kommer det en annen tannlege ut. Hun går rett bort til meg. Hva heter du, spør hun. Jeg bare følger sonen min, sier jeg. Å ja, sier hun og går inn glassdøra. Og jeg blir sittende på venterommet og tenker på min. Jeg ser for meg en vietnameser, andre generasjons innvandrer, som studerer realfag på universitet, med klær kjøpt på Kubus. Han springer kanskje gjennom Oslo sentrum, forsinket til tannlegeavtalen. Kanskje var det et møte som aldri tok slutt. Kanskje var det et barn som ikke ville i barnehagen. Kanskje var det toget som kom for sent fram. Min springer sveit og stresser gjennom Oslo sentrum, og vet ikke at tannlegene allerede tror han framme, at han sitter på venterommet og tror at han ikke forstår godt norsk. Derfor må de spørre han om igjen og om igjen om hva han heter, men min ikke min. Det jeg som der. Jeg fyller bare sonden min, og tannlegen synes at jeg likner på min, og i et lite sekund blir jeg lette over at tannlegene trodde at det var jeg som var min, og ikke sonden min, at han slipper akkurat denne ene gangen. The glass door of the dentist office opens. Is Min here? Asks a grey-haired dentist. Is Min here? He asks again. This time, he looks right at me. I look around and meet the dentist's gaze again and shake my head. The dentist closes the glass door and disappears. What name did he say? I ask my son. Min, I think, replies my son. The dentist appears behind the glass door again. This time, he doesn't open it, but looks through the glass. Our eyes meet again, then he disappears. Then another dentist comes out. She walks straight up to me. What's your name? She asks. I'm just here with my son, I say. Oh, okay, she says, and walks through the glass door. And I'm left in the waiting room, thinking about Min. I picture a Vietnamese man, a second-generation immigrant studying science at university, wearing high street brands. Perhaps he is running through Oslo city centre late for his dentist appointment. Perhaps it was a meeting that wouldn't end. Perhaps it was a child who didn't want to go to nursery. Perhaps it was a train that arrived too late. Min sprints sweating and stressed through Oslo city centre and doesn't know that the dentist thinks he's already here, that he's sitting in the waiting room and that he doesn't understand much Norwegian. That's why they have to ask him again and again what his name is. But Min isn't Min. I'm the one who is there. I'm just here with my son, and the dentist thinks I look like Min, and for a split second I'm relieved that the dentist believed that it was me who was Min and not my son, that he avoided it, this time at least. Grandfather and I have almost the same name, Brynjulf Jung Tjønn, but the small difference is my middle name. 4 small letters that create an entire world between us. I want to be so white, so white, so light, so light, so normal, so normal, so boring, so boring. I want to have an empty screen I can fill, write the story of myself anew. Every day I write my story anew. Every day I want to delete all that I've written. Every day I want to fabricate and lie about my life. Every day I want to write about a whole other life. I want to write about the happy white man, the one who wakes up refreshed every morning, sends his children to school with freshly made lunches, kisses his wife before heading to work on his bike. The one who always gets new important work tasks because he looks so trustworthy. I want to write about the happy man who has never experienced anything bad, to whom life does nothing but give and give, who does nothing but take and take. This man with a terraced house in Ullevål Hageby and a 7-seater electric car. This man with a robotic lawnmower that can endure a 45-degree incline. This man who, despite his 4 children and busy job, manages to work out 4 times a week. This man who goes to bed with a smile on his lips and sleeps through the night. This man who is so happy and light. Let me be like him, die like him. What do you want to be when you die? I want to become dark Norwegian earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for such a wonderful reading. It's so great to be able to share Brynjulf's work with our readers today. I should say that the full collection is looking for a publisher in English. So if anybody in the audience is a poetry publisher, here is a manuscript that is just waiting to be snapped up. Thank you so much, Rachel. We will come back to you during the Q&A. It is with great pleasure now for me to introduce Csilla, who is going to read from her English translations, and Şafak, who is going to read from the originals. So Csilla is a writer, translator, artist, novelist. Her novel Bed, Table, Door was published last year. She translates from German and Hungarian. She was born in Budapest and left socialist Hungary in 1981. So Csilla, I'm going to hand over to you and let you also introduce Şafak for us, if that's okay.
Thank you for the invitation, and I'm delighted to be here. You mentioned that I came in 1981, so I left Hungary in 1981, and this is very important for me because actually Ted Hughes established or helped to start MPT in order to bring literature from the behind the Iron Curtain. So I think it's very important for me to be here in that regard as well. So yes, we agreed with Şafak that I will read a couple of poems of mine, and then he will read his in German, and I will read the translation. The first poem I chose is Axis Mundi, and I chose this because it has a very long story of translation. I wrote it in a Hungarian originally, and then found it many years later. And then in 2021, I asked 19 translators to translate the poem into their language, and then I made a film poem out of it. So this is the latest version of the poem. Axis Mundi. My head is the earth, my skin the air. Dusk and dawn weave my hair. I am the earth and make love with the sky. On my horizon we touch, and eternity cascades on me with the night seeded with light. And I would like to I forgot to describe myself, so I have my blue glasses on, and I have gray hair and colored scarf around my neck, and the blue cardigan because it's quite cold here in Northern Ireland as well. Okay, and the next poem is somehow linked to Şafak's poetry. It's a prose poem, but also I would say it's an echo poem. Breath. The wheezing in my lungs plays the violin of pain. A child's cry, a sinful confession, impotent compassion, and still know that all is in transition. The in and out, rise and fall, the waves. You stop moving and become the earth's crust, and yet illusion. The sun does not rise above, and I'm afraid to say the night doesn't fall on you. You slowly spin around your axis, and the clouds float following your curves, but more often they take their own course. Day and night, reality depends on where you see it from. Remember, the earth protests, and still you don't see that you are its part. Sinews under skin, veins bubble with the lava of blood, eyes sandy from sleep, muscles strained after a night shift. Many dreams tired them out, but there is no recall, only rhymes. The mind's tongue rests on a soft, mossy palate in its cave. Every word germinates and pops out like mushroom. Not that of the nuclear bomb, but a simple organism that is capable of spreading fast in the dark. Fungi. Without labor, the air is carried through the windpipe. Man-made viruses made man extinct. His worst enemy, illusion. Rattle. Only forgiveness can change the past. let this be not the last. And so I met Şafak Sariçiçek through the Ulyanovsk city of UNESCO City of Literature, and through their website we started a dialogue, and this is how we arrived to a stage where we translated a few poems, and which were published in Amenar magazine, and also one in MPT before. And then last November I had a residency in Sweden, literature residency, where I was able to translate his collection, Kometen. And this was published in 2019, and it was celebrated as the starter of a new wave of echo poetry in German. So I would like to ask Şafak to read the title poem first in German, and then I will read the translation.
Thank you, Csilla. I'm also happy to be here and honored. Just a quick description of myself, because everyone before did it. I have stubbles. It's the same as in the modern poetry magazine. It was the same description: short hair and a gray polo shirt and black hair. Kometen, Kometen. Krokodilrücken lugender Frösche im Abwasser. Aus strohartigem Gesträuch die Zimbeln von Insekten. Welcher Art? Ich weiß es nicht. Deine Augen, dein Aug, als in Entfernung ergriff eine untergehende Sonne, Kälte, anbrechender Zeit danach. Belangloses erscheint oft schön und Schönes oftmals ohne Belang, und es scheint die Gefahr ebenso unvermittelt. Zu sein, einfach, ohne Nadelgedanken, die Elektrik dem Fisch, wie Schall der Fledermaus zeichnet, hubschraubende Libelle und Heuschreckenartige. Wenig zu sehen verwehrt sich, die Welt rauscht in Rennbahnen, Rennbahnen im Kopf, deine Augen, dein Aug schlugen Lager auf darin. Mit dem Wasser der Wochen flute ich es, bis du davonziehst. Abgestimmt und von ungefähr, heiß brodelnd und im Packeis der Polarlichter. Sie setzt aus einer höheren Lage die Natur. Eine verirrte Amöbe daneben, wir selbsternannte Herren der Schöpfung, wir wiederkäuen Ignoranz und Gier, wie Kuhherden das Gras und fliegen die Fladen. Wir müssen unsere Würde wieder errichten. Sie irrt hohlwangig durch Höhlen, künstlich geschaffen. Wirklichkeitsfluchten. Membranen, Membranen, Membranen aus Glaskabeln, Geldpapier und Höhlen. Ist denn der Mensch wirklich dem Menschen Wolf, dies eine Insel des Egoismus? Wir hoffen, wir sind dann wenigstens Rudel unseren Wölfen, achten dann wenigstens unsere Einzelgänger und anderes Getier unseren Schwachen. Was du besetzt hast bei mir, wird in Flutwochen untergehen. Zitternde und stetige Schwalbenflügel, Gesamtstrom der Dinge, Tempel der Anmut, erhabener Staub einer Galaxie. Verschluckte Hoffnungen müssen Pechlöcher wieder ausspeien. Verwandte sterben. Menschen erkranken und kommen mit Geschrei auf die Welt, sehen Krokodilrücken der Frösche oder nicht. Vielstimmen grasender Zimbeln und Augen, die sich lieben oder nicht mehr das tun. Bei manch einem bleiben Gedanken hängen mit Widerhaken. Ein anderer löscht ohne Gedanken einem anderen das Licht und wirft Feuer in Heim und Herzensgut. Vielleicht braucht die Würde einen neuen Wall und sprengen wir die Bunker der Höhlen mit einem Neubeginn der Wege. Vielleicht auch nicht. Schwalben werden weiter Musik mit Zitterflügeln oder stetigen Fluten. Just a second. I'm switching between the screen and my paper. Oder stetigen Flug zeichnen auf Lufthaut. Was zerfällt, lodert neu auf. Die Energie geht nicht verloren. Höchstens auf eine Gefilden- und Raumreise geht sie, nimmt Malmströme wie Asketenvorhut. Wir können die Frage der dunklen Materie bislang nicht auflösen, nicht das Joch unter unseresgleichen. Vom Erkrankten will ich schweigen, aber zäh sind wir dran am Arbeiten dagegen. In bleichen Kitteln, sterilen Labors, Forscherverstand. Glückseligkeit impft ihr in Herz und es schadet nicht das Lachen. Wie der Schimpansen von Menschenart gefangen gehalten, eingehegt. Nicht das Vertrauen eines Kangalhundes. Nicht verloren geht Energie, ein Chamäleon. Ich las von einem Kometen, ein galaxieverlassenes Dorf Ostanatoliens reichmachend. Kometen, Kometen, Kometen machen reich. Es lodert neu auf, was zerfällt. Habt Hoffnung. Habt einfach mal Mut zu Naiven. Thank you.
Comets, comets. Backs of crocodile frogs peek from the sewage. Insects place symbols in straw bushes. What kind? I do not know. Your eyes, your eye, when the distance took hold of it, was a setting sun, cold times in its aftermath. The irrelevant often appears beautiful, and beauty is often irrelevant, and it seems the danger is just as sudden. Just to be, simply without needing thoughts, like electrocommunicating fish or echolocating bats sending signals to hovering dragonflies and locusts. There's little to see, the world rushes along on racetracks in the head. Your eyes, your eye, set up camp there. I will flood it with the water of the weeks until you move away. Arranged and approximate, boiling hot, and in the pack ice of polar lights. Nature suspends from a higher position. She does. While lost, amoeboid, we are the self-proclaimed lords of creation. We regurgitate ignorance and greed like cows the grass and flies the flatbread. We must rebuild our dignity. It errs hollow cheek through caverns, artificially created escapes from reality. Membranes, membranes, membranes from fiberglass, paper money, and caves. Is man really the human wolf? This an island of egoism. We hope, and then we are at least a pack of wolves, and then we respect at least our owners and other weaker animals. What you have taken from me will perish in the flood weeks. Trembling and steady swallow wings, a total flow of things, temple of grace, the sublime dust of a galaxy. Swallowed hopes must regurgitate pits of bad luck. Relatives die, people fall ill, and come into the world screaming, whether they see the crocodile backs of frogs or not. A cacophony of grazing symbols and eyes that love each other or no longer do so. In some of us, the thoughts remained hooked on barbs. Another extinguishes the light in another without a thought, throwing fire into homes and the goodness of hearts. Perhaps dignity needs a new wall and will blow up the bunkers and caves with the new beginning of ways. Or maybe not. The swallows with trembling wings or steady flight will draw more music on their skin. What falls apart flares up again. Energy that does not get lost. At most, it goes on a journey across the fields and into space. Take maelstroms like an ascetic vanguard. So far, we have not solved the question of dark matter, nor the yoke among our kind. I will not speak about illness, but on the other hand, we are tough at work in pale smokes and sterile laboratories, our scientific mind. vaccinate happiness into the heart, and it does not harm to laugh. We, the chimpanzees of humankind, captured, imprisoned, having not the trust of a Kanga dog. Energy does not get lost, it's a chameleon. I read from a comet. It enriched a galaxy-deserted East Alatonian village. Comets, comets, comets make rich. It flares up again, what falls apart. Be hopeful. Just have the courage to be naive. And the poem that is published now in the journal is 20 Milligramm lyrisches Antidepressant.
Yes, for this to have effect, it must be presented in a very optimistic way. 20 Milligramm lyrisches Antidepressivum. Das hier ist ein kolossales Antidepressivum. Famoses Gelächter, positive Stimmung verflüssigt in die Behälter einer Druckerpatrone und von dort auf diesen Zettel, den du jetzt in der Hand hältst. Das hier ist Optimismus, explosive Mischung aus gehobener Laune und ein Antriebsschub aus Buchstaben. Du bist fantastisch phänomenal. Gut, dass es dich gibt. Das hier ist ein kolossales Antidepressivum. Ein lyrisches 20 Milligramm. Für dich versiegelt in diesem Laborglas.
milligrams lyrical antidepressant. This is here a colossal antidepressant. Splendid laughter, positive mood liquefied in the canister of a printer cartridge, and from there onto this note that you hold in your hand. This is here optimism, an explosive mix of elevated mood and motivation thrust made of letters. You are fantastic, phenomenal. It's good that you exist. This is here a colossal antidepressant, a lyrical 20 milligram sealed for you in this file.
Thank you so much, Csilla and Şafak, and especially for that little pump into the veins of happiness and positivity there at the end. We've got about 15 minutes for questions now. So if anybody in the audience does have a question that you would like to ask any of our panelists, I would encourage you to put that into the chat. I suppose I wanted to come back to you to start with, Rachel, if that's okay. So we heard a little bit about how Şafak and Csilla found each other. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about how you had come to Brynjulf's work, and I suppose what was it that attracted you to the writing and made you want to translate it?
Sure. I should say, by the way, that Brynjulf, I did invite Brynjulf along to the event today, but unfortunately he had a meeting that it started at exactly the same time as this event, so he did really want to be here, but unfortunately he isn't. So he's here in spirit, just so that everyone knows. But yeah, I essentially was introduced to the work by the agent who had asked me to do a sample translation of the work because it was doing so well in Norway, and they thought, well, they'd made it a kind of focus title and they were really kind of going to try and get it out into the English-speaking market. So I'd initially just been asked to do one poem for the catalogue, just to kind of whet people's appetites, I suppose. And then they asked me to come back and they asked me to do a longer section of it. So there are 7 sections in the collection, and I translated 3 of them as a sample translation. So I had a bit of an extended sample. And yeah, I think I just felt that, you know, they were such important poems. I feel like you know, like I'd kind of said earlier on, I feel like when we think about Norwegian literature, a lot of the times we're thinking about crime, or we're thinking about Knausgård, or, you know, we're thinking about, you know, very specific things. And again, when we think about Norway or Scandinavia more generally, we tend not to think of it as we tend to think positive things about it. We tend to think that they're good countries and there's like, you know, equality there, and there's, you know, it's a fantastic place to live. It's a socialist utopia and all the rest of it. And these were poems that were saying, well, actually, I'm Norwegian and this is not my experience. I experience racism, I experience prejudice, I experience, you know, microaggression. This is, you know, just because I'm not a white Norwegian man. And I feel like, you know, I'd done the sample of it, and I was keen to continue working on it because I'd worked with Brynjulf and I'd obviously sent him the poems as well, and he was fairly, you know, positive towards them, and he was very pleased that I maybe wanted to continue putting it out into English. And I just feel like, you know, I wanted to continue doing it because as translators, I feel that we don't often have a say in the books that we work on. It's often books that we're assigned. We don't often have a say, well, I would rather do this, I would rather do that. But when you translate poetry, you can, you know, these are all passion projects, you know, and, you know, I could pick and choose what I wanted to do. And I just felt that this was such an important collection that, you know, it would be good to try and get this out there for people to see other Norwegian perspectives, and not just this idea of Norway being fjords and mountains and socialist utopia, you know, that there are actually problems there, and here's a Norwegian person saying openly this is the problems that are here. So I just felt it was an important collection to work with, and I just really enjoyed the style. I like that it's extremely pared back, it's not hiding anything, it's very I'm not going to dress this up because why should I dress something up that's so awful to me, you know? So yeah, yeah. That was a bit of a ramble, sorry.
No, that's great. And I'm kind of glad you kind of brought up the idea that normally you get assigned tasks, but actually in this case you got to actually choose something, because I think as you say, with sort of commercial fiction or with non-fiction, it's the thrust is coming from sort of agents or publishers who go to look for a translation. I'm totally amazed that you got approached by an agent for poetry, really. That sort of well done, that agent. But often we talk about kind of poetry translation as the poor relation in the room in translation, but in fact, is it maybe sometimes that because you have that freedom with poetry, because you're not chasing a commercial success, that maybe you get to introduce more interesting or kind of diverse work? Do you think that's true, Rachel?
I think yeah, I think, you know, you know, the publishing industry is an industry at the end of the day, you know, and they are looking for things that are going to sell. And the thing about poetry, or translated poetry in particular, is that, you know, you're never going to become a millionaire translating poetry. You know, a lot of the time it is passion projects, and it's things that, you know, you can maybe translate things that are maybe a little bit different, or things that maybe wouldn't be commercially successful, because no matter what you were translating poetry wise, it probably isn't going to be commercially successful unless you have like a really fantastic, you know, or really you know, remarkable, you know, example of that, you know. So I do think that it does give you the opportunity to maybe translate things that are not commercially, you know, successful. You're not necessarily assigned it, you know, you kind of translate things that you're drawn to. And I think that's good because it means that we can choose voices. We could just amplify voices that maybe don't have a voice, or aren't often kind of represented in more commercial, you know, strands of the publishing industry and the translation industry. So yeah, no, I would totally agree with that.
Csilla, if I can just bring you in on that, I suppose, does that kind of responsibility or freedom as a translator, do you feel a kind of responsibility to bring in what we might sort of call underrepresented voices, or is what you choose to translate totally a passion project, as Rachel calls it? And maybe you can't untangle those two things, but what was it, I suppose, that made Şafak a passion project for you in this case?
Oh, at the beginning of our discussion, actually, I asked him about his background and the language background that he's coming from, and it's interesting that I think I'm right to say, Şafak, that German is not his first language. He's writing in German, but he has this long heritage of Zazaki language, which is, I think it's Kurd origins, and somehow this seeps into the German as well. And I think I am in the same position as well, because I'm writing in English. I write in English, but I translate from Hungarian as well as German. So there is something similar in our approaches. So that was also important for me. But I mean, his poetry is just, I'm amazed by it, because there's mythology, there's a new mythology being created at the same time. And there are philosophical references, and so it's almost like he starts from a very, very minute, like a cockroach, or I don't know, the smallest things, and then it goes out into the universe. So I really liked that about the comet and collection especially. And of course, I had this, I was lucky because we could collaborate, so I could ask questions, and if something was not clear, he was always helpful. So I think that was important for me as well. So there's a collaboration, which is great. And we are doing it through, I don't know, internet. But yeah, the words.
And Şafak, I wondered if you wanted to just say a little bit about how you felt about being translated by Csilla, whether you felt you had to give a lot of help, or if you wanted to give more help than you were asked for, if that makes sense. Did you feel you wanted to offer more comments, or did you just leave her to it?
It was a beautiful feeling, and I think our collaboration in this translation work, it grew organically, because at the beginning we did not have any like any frame or any we agreed on this or something, but it grew naturally. Like Csilla asked questions, or she wasn't sure about something, or I wasn't sure about a translation or a word of hers, and this intensified, and it intensified into really long emails with detailed detailed questions, almost like linguistically philosophical questions and answers. I found it I'm really grateful for it, because I didn't have this experience in poetry and translation with someone who understood the poems so deeply and intensely and to the point. I mean, there isn't, of course, a 100% meaning that you can transmit into the other language, but Csilla is really coming near to it, and she's a really gifted translator. I'm really grateful.
Great, thank you. There are no more questions coming in the chat, so I'm just going to keep going with mine unless one appears. Both of you are translating writers who themselves are not coming out of a single linguistic or cultural heritage. Both of the writers that you're translating are bringing their own different mixed heritages and backgrounds and languages. And I just wondered if that changed to some extent or affected how you went about translating their work, or if you felt, like Rachel, for example, whether you had to sort of do any research into the kind of Korean background or kind of Korean linguistic influences. And then sort of the same question to you, Csilla, obviously with the Kurdish and the German and the Turkish influences, if you looked into outside of your kind of source language, so to speak. Rachel, if we maybe start with you.
Yeah, it wasn't too much of I don't want to say issue, it's not the right word, but it wasn't something that I felt I needed to do when translating Brynjulf's poems specifically, because they don't really draw in an awful lot. It kind of mentions like, this is where I was born and this is where I was found and this is the name of the children's home I grew up in, but everything is very much situated in Norway, and it's all situated kind of in the west of Norway. It's situated in Oslo. When he moves to Oslo, it's all very much Norway based, and it's very much saying, I think he himself has said, like, I feel 100% Norwegian, but this is how people treat me, so there wasn't too much of the Korean side as opposed to just explaining kind of, this is where I'm from and this is who I am and this is how I ended up in Norway. One thing that I did need to have a little bit of a think about was that there are poems in the collection that contain slurs, and I had to have a little think about how to translate that, how to be kind of sensitive and how to be careful when translating that, because it's obviously quite delicate, and obviously being a white translator as well, it's obviously important to kind of be aware of these types of things. One of the considerations that I did is that Norwegian and English, if you don't know, that they're extremely kind of close languages. They're very, very close. And a lot of the kind of slurs or maybe derogatory phrases the Brynjulf was using to describe what he's been called were very similar to words and, you know, phrases and slurs that exist in English, you know, so I could kind of put them over into English without too much of an issue. But where there was an issue is where there were slurs or derogatory terms that were specifically in a Norwegian context, and I had to really contemplate, how do I translate that? Do I try and think of a way to say this in English, which didn't necessarily feel right? So I had to have a bit of a consideration of that, and what I ultimately decided to do was to leave these specific types in the Norwegian and italicize it. And I know that there's kind of an issue or like a discussion around, should we italicize, you know, words from the source language in the text, because it kind of, you know, if we don't, you know, if we don't italicize sushi, for example, why should we italicize anything else, you know? But I think in this, I think it worked personally because the italics, the criticism behind the italics is that it foreignizes and it kind of it puts it at a distance, and it makes it kind of, you know, it kind of creates a kind of distance between the word and the text. And I felt that that was maybe appropriate in terms of translating the slurs, because slurs by nature are othering, and they're supposed to make, you know, put a distance between you and the person that's there. Sorry, my cat's getting in on the conversation. There's a, you know, they're putting a bit of a, you know, distance between you and the person. They're supposed to be othering, they're supposed to be alienating, you know. So I felt that that was a way to kind of approach that, to, you know, translate the ones that were close to English, and the ones that were not, leave them in Norwegian but italicize them, because in the context you know that it's a slur anyway. So that was more, I had more of a thought process around that as opposed to any of the Korean elements, because that didn't come in as much as other things, for example. So
That's great. That's really interesting. Yeah, the question of how you format things carrying its own weight of politics is a really crucial point. Csilla, can I come to you to answer the same question? And then we have a question from an audience member after that as well.
Yes, so for me, in the collection, there are ekphrastic poems as well. So it helped to find the painting itself that was the poem about, for instance. But linguistically, I think, I mean, the grammar is very, very, I mean, he uses grammar in a very unusual way in German as well. So, and that translate that into English was really challenging, because you still want to retain the meaning, and you want people to understand, but then you want to give back that staccato rhythm at the same time. So I think that was challenging, and I found that interesting to do. And also, I mean, there are many philosophical references that I had to look up. I think there was a Nietzsche as well, and so I had to read up as well, and that was again very good, and enjoyed it very much. So yeah, it was very complex, and it was great that I had this residency, because I could just focus on that work for 4 weeks. So it was yeah, amazing, and I was very lucky to have that.
Thank you. We've got one question from an audience member and also contributor to MPT, Mamata Nanda, and she asks and says, as a translator, I like to be free to get on with it without much involvement or comments from the original poet. Do the other translators ever feel like that? Rachel, what about you? Maybe not even in this particular case. What's your normal preference?
Oh God, yes, please just let me get on with it. Yeah, no, I do like getting input from the translator, but it's from the author, sorry, but it often depends what kind of input that it's giving, because sometimes I do get, it's more of a collaboration, which is really nice. And then other times it's more kind of like micromanaging, where I'm a bit like, well, I need to, you know, especially with Norwegian, like I said earlier, they're very similar languages. And a lot of the times you might get people being like, oh, but that isn't what I wrote. And it's a bit like, yes, I know, but you also wrote it in Norwegian. I'm writing it in English. It's slightly different. And it can be a little bit difficult because the languages are so close that a lot of people think you can just do it kind of literally and it will come out kind of more or less the same, when sometimes you do need to be a little bit more creative. And it's really nice to have that, especially with poetry. You know, I mean, there's one thing with, you know, translating fiction, which I do a lot of as well, but particularly with poetry, you need a bit of creative reign. You know, you need to be able to kind of like move a little bit. You can't be kind of like boxed into exactly what it says, because, you know, different languages give different effects, you know, and, you know, you need to build things up in different ways depending on the language. So yeah, I do like, you know, Brynjulf, for example, I'm just doing it and sending it to him, and he's giving me comments on it, and I'll put in notes going, I've changed this place name because it's a pun in Norwegian and it makes a better pun in English if I change it to the, you know, things like that. And he'll be like, yep, good, you know, things like that. So yeah, I quite like being left to get on with it in the terms of being given enough flexibility to kind of be creative with it. But I quite like getting some input as well, because then you know that you're doing it right and you're not kind of upsetting the the poet or the writer in question. So yeah.
And Csilla, what about you? I don't know what you're going to say. Şafak, close your ears maybe at this point.
I actually, no, with Şafak it was quite free, because I mean, regarding the poetry part of it, he let me get on with it and do my own shtick such. But yes, I had the experience with other poets when it was it seemed to be a close collaboration, but it was nearly micromanaging, and then I just thought that maybe some of my wonderful lines were too strictly sounding on the page. So yes, it can happen that as well, but I think you have to respect whatever the poet wants, and then you have to decide, oh, maybe I don't want to put my name to this at the end. So that can happen as well.
Great. I'm afraid we are coming to the end of our session. Thank you so much for joining us as readers today. I should say that this issue of MPT, which features many of the poems that were read today, is available now. The link to subscribe is in the chat. You can also simply visit our website, modernpoetryintranslation.com. And also just to say thanks to Arts Council England, who are our major funder and make sure that MPT keeps going. And also just to say thank you to the audience members for joining us today. We've got some nice comments appearing as well from people, and I'm sorry we haven't had time to cover all of them, but thank you. And just a final thanks to our speakers and readers today. So Rachel Rankin, Csilla Toldy, and also Şafak, Sariçiçek, and yes, please do buy the magazine, read it. And if you are a poetry publisher looking for 2 excellent volumes of poetry still to be snapped up, then Rachel and Csilla are available. You can always find them via us as well. Thank you very much, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you again at a Modern Poetry in Translation event. Thank you.